Broadcasting across the state of Wisconsin on the Civic Media Radio Network and around the world on the Civic Media app. This is the Dom Salvia Show. And now, here's your host, Dom Salvia.
This is the Dom Salvia Show, and it is on all the broadcast stations of Civic Media on this very important day, this significant, hugely significant day in the history of America, coming to you from Radio Park in Racine, joined here in the studios of Civic Media by my outstanding producer and colleague as we talk with you today and analyze and discuss this major event in American history that's unfolding, even as we speak. Delighted to have you with me, but also my terrific producer, Jess, who's here with me, and we are going to be taking your phone calls, your comments, your questions, your inquiries. That number here is 855-752-4842. I am not Dom Salvia, although I appear routinely with Jess and him on his show, typically late in the week. Dom is away doing some important work today, and he has asked me to sit in for him on this important day in our history. He probably did not predict that our syllabus, Jess, would be as dramatic as it has been, but dictated by what otherwise would have been and still is a major news story coming out of Washington, but increased in ferocity and magnitude and significant by the fact that there was almost a brawl this afternoon, this morning, today, throughout the day, in the Oval Office of the White House, something that we have never seen before in American history, a contest, a fighting spat among the Vice President of the United States, the President of the United States, and the President of Ukraine. Coming here to try to attempt not only to patch over some differences, but arguably, maybe sort of also talk about the possibility of an agreement that would have involved providing some of the minerals from Ukraine to the United States. We'll get into that a little bit more. It all went off the rails today. We're going to spend some time listening to that here on the broadcast stations of Civic Media, digesting it, analyzing it, and offering some commentary about why this is indeed so significant at the big levels, at the medium levels, at the small levels as well. This, once again, the Dom Salvia Show. My name, Jim Santelle, sitting in for Dom on this important day in our history. Once again, soliciting with my partner, Jess, your comments and questions at 855-752-4842. You have become used to my beginning these kinds of analyses with some references to the law and to the Constitution. Indeed, that's where we're going to begin this afternoon, even as we promise, moving quickly into the major story, giving you some audio, some sense of the calamity in the White House of earlier today. But let's begin by thinking once again about the Constitution of the United States of America. Whether you watch tonight on television or listen as you can in just a few moments to the audio of what happened in the Oval Office involving President Zelensky, President Trump, and Vice President Vance today, whether you do that, however you consume that particular piece of history going on today, you will also come away thinking, how is it that we've come to this place, that we've come to this time when we have leaders supposedly of the Western world? We'll get back to talk about world order concepts in just a few moments. But you may also come to ask yourself, how is it that the President of the United States of America is the one who's engaging with foreign officials on these all-important issues? That is not an insignificant question. It's a civics question that, once again, I suspect that most of us who have gone through 6th, 7th, and 8th grade civics, maybe even later in your school years, understand. But it's important to understand, too, that the responsibility for international matters, yes, indeed, including our relationship with Ukraine, our relationship to nations in Western Europe, in Africa, in Asia, Australia, South America, North America, all places, also derives from several different spots in the Constitution of the United States of America. In fact, Article 2 of the Constitution, in which we talk all about the presidency setting up his, perhaps one day her, responsibilities under this terrific document, fairly sparse when it comes to international obligations and responsibilities. Talk plainly in Section 1 and Section 2 about, of course, being the commander-in-chief. That's no small thing. And that gives rise to a lot of the president's responsibilities when it comes to overseas and international engagements. Also talks about the capacity, the obligation of our president to appoint ambassadors, to sign off on treaties, to all kinds of other things that suggest that the president does indeed have a significant role when it comes to engaging with foreign emissaries and foreign leaders. But it's significant to note that, yes, indeed, the Congress of the United States of America, the first portion of the Constitution of the United States, Article 1 of the Constitution, provides an awful lot of responsibility vested in the Congress, in our legislature as well. Commerce involving foreign nations, things related to war powers, of course, that's the big one, declaring war, granting letters and rules, captures on land and water, all kinds of things related to our movements around the globe. Also, imports, significant these days as our president talks a lot about imports and tariffs in our nation. And so it is important to remember, even on this day, when we focus upon the executive branch and its relationship to foreign nations, that our Congress also has a say, some involvement in this. And indeed, I suspect that one of the takeaways from this horrific thing that happened today in America in the White House, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, is where is Congress? What is the congressional response to this from both the Democrats, the Republicans, independents? All people across America should be asking their representatives how they feel about this, and by that I don't mean emotionally, what their intellectual takeaway is from what they see and what they hear these days in the White House. Specifically today, February 28th, 2025, here on the Dom Salvia Show. There is no doubt that the arrival of Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine on Friday was a part of an orchestrated arrival. The plan, of course, was to not only ease some of the tensions that have been growing between the current president of the United States and the current president of Ukraine, but also once again to perhaps negotiate, maybe even put the final trappings of this deal related to minerals in Ukraine, maybe for some kind of odd repayment for the support that our nation has provided in the war against Russia. But all of that follows an awful lot of indication that the world is changing, and that world order is no longer what it was even as late as a couple of months ago. Jess and I are going to take you through a few of those specific indications that lead up to today's events that indicate, again, that over the past, frankly, weeks and certainly days, there has been a movement by this president to realign the very world order, the world order according to which we live and we breathe. Let's begin with some things that you have all also digested in recent days. We know that as much as we've got the routine visits of foreign officials to the White House for various purposes, some of them obviously more closely allied to the United States than others. One of our close allies, of course, is France. And that goes back to the time of the Revolutionary War. We know that well, the support the French gave us in fighting the Brits. And so perhaps in some linear relationship between that and what happened just earlier this week, we had Emmanuel Macron, who is, of course, the president of France, visiting the president, sitting in the very chair that Zelensky was sitting in today, and engaging with the president in some discussion about this issue of who is going to pay for or even repay for the support given the United States and Europe to fight the war effort in Ukraine. The president began to talk about some of that and began to use words like repayment, the Europeans doing the same thing. And at some point, Emmanuel Macron, who plainly is appreciating fully what the president is saying, decided that he could not countenance that, could not stand to have what is basically a lie, not just a misstatement, a lie about the arrangements for that war support. He reached over, he grabbed the forearm of our president and began to speak and corrected our president on his basic fundamental lie about what was going on in connection with the support given to our ally, at least up until today, and that's Ukraine. Just do we have that cut with Emmanuel Macron?
Let's take a listen.
Compensated, but not by Ukraine, by Russia, because they were the one to aggress.
Again, just so you understand, Europe is loaning the money to Ukraine. They get their money back.
No, in fact, to be frank, we paid 60% of the total effort, and it was through, like the US, loans, guarantee, grants, and we provided real money. To be clear, we have 230 billion frozen assets in Europe, Russian assets, but this is not as a collateral of a loan because this is not our belonging. So they are frozen. If at the end of the day in the negotiation we will have with Russia, they're ready to give it to us, super. It will be loan at the end of the day and Russia will have paid for that.
If you believe that, it's okay with me.
Mr. President.
But they get their money back, we don't, and now we do. But, that's only fair.
An incredible exchange in the White House just days ago in the very seats that the President of the United States and the President of Ukraine were seated in, along with the Vice President just off to the side earlier today. The relationship between France and the United States has been long-standing, literally hundreds of years, and there it is cracking. And there you not only have lies told by our president, corrected by the French president for clarity, not only today, but for all time, but you've got a reordering in a small way, but nonetheless a significant way of the world order and the relationship that has existed between France and our nation.
And I think that there are actually two very important clarifications that Emmanuel Macron gives. Not only is Europe financing 60% of the war effort against what Trump has said of how America has been funding it, Russia was the aggressor in this war. This was not a war begun by Ukraine.
And that's the other important point, again, that our current president continues to bandy about, not only on social media, but in his spoken word as well. This notion somehow that history has to be rewritten so that we understand the war's initiation, its origin, as something other than what it was. All of that being corrected by an ally of ours in the Oval Office of the White House. As our broadcast this afternoon continues, we're going to trace some additional cracks in the world order involving the British Prime Minister and, yes, indeed, ultimately, the relationship between our nation and Ukraine. All of that a part of our continuing coverage here, getting to this major story that changes American history, changes world history here on the Dom Salvia Show. This is the Dom Salvia Show. My name is Jim Santelle, sitting in for Dom Salvia this hour and next hour as your host. Also joining me in the studio here of Civic Media is my outstanding producer, Jess, and together we are taking your questions, your comments, your insights, your perspectives on this major story. Leading into that, the two of us are, by providing some recent history in connection with other much smaller, it turns out, spats between our allies and the United States, also happening in the Oval Office. We had the visit also just days ago of Keir Starmer, who is the fairly recently elected Prime Minister of Great Britain, similarly engaging in discussion, public discussion, in the media, in front of the media, for all of us to consume about this continuing issue related to repayment of Ukraine and the mechanisms through which we provided historically and continue to provide a support for the Ukrainian government. Also indicating that when it comes to Great Britain, England, one of our strongest, if not the strongest ally, yes, even after the Revolutionary War, becoming just that, also some fracturing there as well. And then we have an awful lot of commentary by our president himself, who begins to talk about other world leaders, including a fellow named Putin. He is, of course, the president of Russia. And Jess, I think we've got some tape of him, some audio of him talking about whether or not Putin is a dictator, his status on the face of the planet. Can we play some of that?
Indeed. We have a question. Would Trump consider Putin a dictator?
There you
When
go.
you call Zelensky a dictator, would you use the same words regarding Putin?
I don't use those words lightly. I think that we're going to see how it all works out. Let's see what happens. I think we have a chance of a really good settlement between various countries. And, you know, you're talking about Europe and you're talking about Ukraine as part of that whole situation. The other side has a lot of support also.
That's what we call word salad, right, Jess?
Indeed,
That's what we
indeed.
call non-responsive in my industry, and I suspect certainly in yours, in common language, right? That's not responsive to the question. Plainly, our president could not publicly state that Putin is a dictator, something that everyone who understands recent history not only appreciates, but is not afraid to articulate, to describe something as what it is.
And something that he had no problem attributing to Zelensky, someone who won an election quite popularly, in fact, much more popularly than Trump won his election here.
Could not be better stated, exactly. And so that leads us into yet another clip that we have, in which, in the wake of this commentary, this general language that we have going on now in the White House about who's a dictator and who is not, we know that our president also on social media, other venues, referred to Zelensky, again, plainly, before he's arrived today, as a dictator, suggesting once again that the war in Ukraine somehow was the product of aggression by Ukraine and by Zelensky himself, which is not only laughable, but horrifically, again, in the category of a lie. But we've got a reporter also asking the president, again, in a very recent news presentation, a news engagement there in the East Room of the White House, whether or not the president, our president, intended to apologize to Volodymyr Zelensky upon his arrival for describing Zelensky as a dictator.
Mm-hmm.
Just, do we have that tape as well?
We do. Here's the question, and then we'll go to the answer.
Wonderful.
Mr. President, tomorrow you're seeing President Zelensky to sign this deal on minerals and energy that could be hugely important to the United States. Will you take the opportunity to apologize to him for calling him a dictator while praising Vladimir Putin, who is a dictator?
And the response.
I think we're going to have a very good meeting tomorrow, 11 o'clock, and I think we're going to have a very good meeting tomorrow morning. We're going to get along really well, okay? We have a lot of respect. I have a lot of respect for him. We've given them a lot of equipment and a lot of money, but they have fought very bravely, no matter how you figure it. They have really fought. Somebody has to use that equipment, and they have been very brave in that sense.
That, yet another non-responsive answer, right, Jess? Maybe not complete
Quite.
word salad there, because we do get some things that just finally lead into our major story of the day, which should have all Americans quaking, all Americans not just scratching their heads about what happened, but fearful about the world order today. Recall again what you just heard, which is yesterday, the President of the United States of America anticipating this hastily organized visit by Volodymyr Zelensky to the United States. He described it as anticipating a very good meeting. We're going to get along very well. Just did I hear that correctly? We're going to get along very well?
That is, in fact, what Trump asserted.
All right. And so it appears, and Jess, you're very, very bright. It appears from what you have already digested that didn't exactly happen today, did it?
No.
Did not.
No, in fact. I believe the first headlines I saw were that Trump and Vance berated Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Berated. We've got those verbs: rebuked, tussled. Let's set this up, and then we're going to be hearing some cuts from this calamitous event in the Oval Office. Again, Zelensky is coming to Washington, D.C. today. It was meant to, once again, as I've said, smooth over this rift that has developed between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky, maybe to seal this agreement that was demanded by our president, according to which Ukraine would presumably hand over maybe billions of dollars worth of mineral rights, maybe to repay somehow the military aid that was provided by our country under the administration of Joe Biden. I suspect he'd had an awful lot of things to say about what happened today as well. And also approved by the Congress over the past 3 years since Russia, and let's say it once again to be clear, its full-fledged invasion in 2022 of Ukraine. All of that antecedent to what happened. Donald Trump seemingly ready to make nice, as he said, with Volodymyr Zelensky by telling reporters on Thursday that he couldn't quite remember that dictator comment. Again, he was expressing his respect and welcoming him to the White House. And that brings us to the door of the West Wing just hours ago with an honor guard, shaking hands politely, but without a great deal of warmth. As we come back here, the encounter that followed that initial greeting went very, very badly. We're going to recount that. We're going to play some clips of this calamity and then do some analysis on the far end here on the Dom Salvia Show. This is the Dom Salvia Show. My name is Jim Santelle, sitting in for Dom this afternoon, this hour, next hour as well, joined in the Radio Park studio here of Civic Media by my outstanding producer, Jess. And together, we're taking your calls, your questions, your comments, already receiving some terrific texts expressing your interests, your concerns about what's happened today in Washington, D.C. Len from Madison writing again, Trump as president has again exhibited another really foul movement in America and the world.
A vowel movement. I like that, Len.
Foul vowel movement to America and the world. We also have Len, Todd, rather, saying, think about this. He called Zelensky a dictator, yet met with him, refused to call Putin a dictator. And yes, indeed, that's exactly what Jess and I have been presenting here as a predicate, a preliminary to all of this in the days immediately before this. We've got a text coming in from Kimber. Outrageously disgraceful conduct on the part of this administration. And so we have Volodymyr Zelensky up to the West Wing and the Oval Office of the West Wing, sitting down with the President of the United States of America earlier today. He is in his usual dark long-sleeve shirt. He begins to explain the history of the war with Russia. Again, that's for everyone's consumption, probably for the consumption of our president as well. Noting that it went back to 2014 when Moscow first seized Crimea and occupied territory there in eastern Ukraine. And then things began to go badly. Our vice president was also sitting there on an adjacent couch. Indeed, even before we get to his intercession here, the things that he said that began to set this conversation on fire, note that J.D. Vance also began to recraft the world order that we're talking about a lot this afternoon. Recall that not too long ago, he was at the Munich Security Conference, and he delivered a speech to our European so-called allies, the 61st Security Conference, described backsliding on freedom of speech and democracy among the European nations regarding the relationship between the United States and the European allies, began to indicate that the problems lie not with our foes, but internal to Europe. Described an ideological war that's beginning to happen there, a culture war against the United States, European allies. That's the way many people have begun to regard this speech. Again, a real chasm in the relationship between our European allies and the United States. All of this leading up, the wrecking ball of Munich, it's sometimes called, but all of that leading up to our hearing once again from my vice president just this afternoon, after Volodymyr Zelensky politely and diplomatically explaining the predicates for his coming there, explaining why it is his nation has had its sovereignty violated by the invasion by Russia. And that is when J.D. Vance, our vice president, interrupted and began assailing Volodymyr Zelensky. I think we have got that tape as well, Jess.
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine? That you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Count one.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military? And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning. That is the president of Ukraine, our ally, I think, to this moment, but maybe less so after this afternoon, not only trying to explain to his counterparts here in the United States why his country is being overrun by the Russian invaders, but also the continuing need for support, right? That's why he's here. And maybe this mineral deal that he was about to sign in some way would cement, maybe not completely cement, but strengthen in some ways the tough thing that's been going on recently. What happens, of course, after that is the accusations, again, being made by our vice president. Right after that, the vice president accused Mr. Zelensky of mounting a propaganda tour in the United States. And again, questions him on whether it's respectful to come to the office, the Oval Office, as you just heard, and disrespect the very president who has been supporting him. Volodymyr Zelensky tried to respond to our vice president's assertion and said that the United States could feel threatened by Russia someday. And isn't that the truth? Isn't that the good instruction just provided by an historian, plainly?
Absolutely.
This is the lesson. This is why these overseas matters, these challenges, these wars, these attacks upon other democracies are appropriately viewed as threats to our nation as well. That's the point that Volodymyr Zelensky is making so clearly and so easily today, not sinking in. Volodymyr Zelensky says, you have a nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. Mm-hmm. He's telling our president about international things, the way the world works, and that ocean that maybe seemingly protects you, in fact, will not protect you for all time. This is the time to stand up, he is saying to the Russians. Prevent them from taking over my country, he says, as a way of protecting not only Ukraine and Europe and all other nations where freedom reigns, but also this nation as well. And then that triggered our president. The President of the United States of America, then sitting just to the left of Volodymyr Zelensky, triggered him and cut off Volodymyr Zelensky. And we've got the tape of that as well. I believe we've got that and began to talk about the ways in which Zelensky was engaging with the vice president, Donald Trump, saying basically, don't tell us what we're going to feel. You're not in a good position. I think, Jess, we've got that tape as well.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's
Remember
exactly
this. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now.
Stunning exchange going on again between the leaders of two allied nations, at least until this afternoon. Perhaps it will continue for some time. Gambling with World War III is what our president said about what Mr. Zelensky was saying diplomatically and in a straightforward fashion. Along the way, our vice president jumped back in and had to say this. He said, have you said thank you once? The answer is yes, Mr. Vice President.
Far more than once.
Far more than once. He has gone to the well of the Congress and thanked the Congress for a huge amount of support, military, financial support that our nation has given, also thanking other European allies for the support they have given to push Russia back. Yes, the answer is yes, he has thanked our nation. He has thanked the former president. He has thanked this president. The answer to that question, Mr. Vice President, is yes. And then along the way, Jess, we get this other rant by our president. And again, it's more than word salad. It is plainly calling up all the demons in his head that somehow were unleashed by virtue of this conversation with an allied leader in the Oval Office of the White House. Do we have that?
We do.
Let me tell you, Putin went through a hell of a lot with me. He went through a phony witch hunt where they used him and Russia. You ever hear of that deal? That was a phony Hunter Biden, Joe Biden scam. Hillary Clinton, Shifty Adam Schiff. It was a Democrat scam. And he had to go through that. And he did go through it. We didn't end up in a war. And he went through it. He was accused of all that stuff. He had nothing to do with it. It came out of Hunter Biden's bathroom.
Hunter Biden's bathroom. That's the level of the discourse, the level of the diplomatic engagement by the President of the United States of America just a few hours ago. What we know, of course, is that in the wake of what can only be described as a diplomatic catastrophe, people in the State Department, whether they're political appointees or the longstanding civil servants, where they're people in all branches of government that know something about international affairs and domestic affairs, are looking at this today and saying absolute calamity, absolute destruction of a relationship. A leader of Ukraine coming to our nation again to maybe bring to some conclusion, some initial negotiation that would have strengthened our ties. And in fact, we get into this not just disagreement, but shouting match inside the White House, in the Oval Office.
I think it's important to note that this was not a shouting match. A match implies
That's correct.
that President Zelensky was participating in the shouting. He did not.
Absolutely. Many people have noted already that this was not a match at all. This was simply bullying and shouting. The reporting is also that the Ukrainian ambassador, who is, of course, there, that always happens whenever you've got a foreign leader coming to the United States. The Ukrainian ambassador to the United States is there. Apparently, she has her head in her hands while this is going on in abject disbelief, seeing all of this destroyed. There is no doubt that she and her staff have spent a huge amount of time. It's not just about her and the staff, but a huge amount of time putting this all together, maybe looking for a time at the end of today when there might have been some glimmer of small hope for a restoration of this breached relationship, and maybe some way for the Ukrainians to continue to get support from the United States and this president in particular by signing a document. There was supposed to be a press conference after this, which of course was quickly canceled, and we know what happened afterwards, and it's all over the news as well. Volodymyr Zelensky, our ally, quickly got back into his van, left the West Wing, and took off. After that hostile exchange in the Oval Office, President Trump issued a statement saying that he and Zelensky had a very meaningful meeting. But that he had determined that the Ukrainian leader is, quote, not ready for peace if America is involved. Trump said Zelensky can come back when he is ready for peace, reiterating some claims that he made during that explosive meeting. Words fail in describing it. Saying that Zelensky disrespected once again the United States of America in its cherished Oval Office, pleading his case for the country's security by pressing for more than just a ceasefire. Yes, Mr. President, that's what the Ukrainian president was there to do, to press for peace, but also to press for peace in a way that would ensure the future of Ukrainian sovereignty. Much was learned that could never be understood without conversation under such fire and pressure. That's what our president said. It's amazing what comes out through emotion. Oh, my. Oh, my. All of that following this calamitous engagement, which is a very diplomatic way of saying something else completely in the Oval Office today. We also know that as a footnote to all of this, Donald Trump then said, wow, this is going to make great television. This is going to make great television. Indeed, among the commentary that I will offer this afternoon, inviting yours as well, and yes, we're going to go to the phones in just a moment or so. Part of the outrage of this is that our president concludes all of this by talking about how the television images will look. And that obviously animates a lot of his focus when it comes to the presidency itself. We know as well, the president does have a capacity for turning these kinds of things, at least for his base and people who don't understand what's going on here. That kind of visual imagery, that fight, some of his supporters like that a lot. In fact, all Americans should recoil in horror in seeing and understanding what happened today. When we come back here on the Dom Salvia Show, more analysis, your calls, your comments as well, here on the broadcast stations of Civic Media.
We're in the fight of our lives. We came from the bottom. There's no keeping us down. In the fight of our lives, we won't be forgotten. Do you hear us now? So tie our tongues from our throats, drain my blood, break my bones. You're not in control. In the fight of
This is the Dom Salvia Show. My name is Jim Santelle, hosting in the final segment of this first hour of our broadcast. Also joined here in Radio Park with my wonderful, fantastic producer, Jess. And together we're taking your comments, your questions, your calls, including a call from Brian, calling in from Milwaukee. Brian, being a part of our conversation this afternoon, thank you for doing just that. Go ahead, Brian.
Thanks for taking my call. It's always been a great show. My big thing is I just hope that those that are listening that are mega supporters, Republicans, and whatnot, I hope that today is the wake-up call that they need, because this was the last straw. I mean,
It should be, right?
it should be. And I still have friends that are backing and saying, oh, no, this was a great thing today. I listened to previous shows like Maggie Dawn, and I'm glad that she stood up to some of those callers. We're just like, what are you guys thinking?
Right.
And
right.
for Trump to say to Zelensky, well, you're the one that's going to start World War III. No, Trump, you're the one that's going to. And this country is so divided that I'm afraid that we are going to have another civil war in this country. I don't want to be sitting there shooting up family members or, battling the states or whatever because our political views are so different. And I'm afraid that's what's going to happen. And all these other countries like Russia and China, they want us to fall apart. They're thinking this is great.
Absolutely. A couple of very important things to unpack there, Brian. One is just your final point there, which is there is an audience out there that is clapping, applauding, right, Brian? And it is people in China, people in Russia, who are seeing this once again as the devolution, the destruction of the world order, and in particular, this alliance relationship there, right? And so a very important posture here. And your first point, Brian, no less important. This was an opportunity for our president to show what almost every president before him has been, which is a statesman, someone who, again, can put aside a lot, if not all, of the animus that may animate him, perhaps one day her, when it comes to relationships with foreign leaders, and say, this is a time for unity. We need to push back not only on the forces of evil and of autocracy that are right now not just knocking at the Ukrainian door, they've busted through. They've taken Crimea, they've taken a major portion of the eastern geography of Ukraine. This was a time for our president to show something beyond himself, beyond just his campaign rhetoric, and show that he is a unifying factor. And in the wake of all of that, in the wake of the Emmanuel Macron disaster and the Keir Starmer disaster and the Vice President Vance disaster overseas, all of these other indications that the world order is coming apart and it is changing dramatically, this was an opportunity for our president to say, no, Americans, you can be assured, Brian, that the war that you're predicting here with a small p will not in fact happen. Be safe, be secure. And we're going to put together an arrangement here. Donald Trump would call it a deal. We're going to put together a treaty here, some arrangement pursuant to which we can ensure our future longevity, both in the United States and also the security of our ally in Ukraine, in Eastern Europe. And he didn't do that. Did just the opposite. A lot of the headlines that Jess has also digested for me and for all of you this afternoon suggest wildly, appropriately, that Donald Trump threw the president of Ukraine out of the White House just hours or so ago. Brian, appreciate very much that comment. Also noting that in connection with the hope that you've articulated that others would finally understand the seriousness of this president. We've got others who are weighing in on just what happened here. Bill from Waukesha saying Zelensky was the only adult in the room.
Indeed.
Indeed. Right, exactly. We've got Robert from Fond du Lac noting that Trump is a communist pig, a draft-dodging coward, grifter, and con man.
But tell us what you really think.
Right, exactly. Robert apparently coming out of his shell today, appropriately, as should all Americans. Volodymyr Zelensky, Robert says, has more courage in his little finger than Trump and Vance have in their entire bodies. Appropriate to talk about that. And we've got Kenneth from Stoughton also saying that, yes, indeed, there are some who looked at this, including one of our congressmen, Derek Van Orden, claiming today, according to Kenneth, that today was a great day for America. I'm not going to...
I would really challenge them to articulate in what way this is a great day for America, in what way this shows the deal-making of this president, the peacemaking ability of this president, when he literally threw the president of a sovereign nation out of the Oval Office and did not sign a deal that would have, in one sense, been incredibly lucrative for this country and would have showed the ability of Trump to negotiate a very difficult deal.
Absolutely. Robert from West Dallas saying this showed that Vice President Vance is not a serious person. What a great way to describe. Not a serious person.
A serious person.
He's in the vice presidency, second highest office in our land. He's not a serious person, and also not ready for prime time. Maybe invoking a little bit of the president's own, apparently, glee. Is that what it is? That this would make great television? We've got Robert also, Dana, from La Crosse, also saying that Trump and Vance told the world today, told all of us, that the U.S. now sides with the axis of evil, and that is a perfect lead-in into my final comments, which are the changing of this world order. We have seen perhaps now, today, not the complete consummation of that break from what has been the history of our nation since World War II, but close to it. When we come back in our second hour, more about that commentary, about the change in world order that happened today in the West Wing, the Oval Office of the White House. Stay with us for more of discussion here on the Dom Salvia Show.
broadcasting across the state of Wisconsin on the Civic Media Radio Network and around the world on the Civic Media app. This is the Dom Salvia Show. And now, here's your host, Dom Salvia.
This is the Dom Salvia Show here on the broadcast stations of Civic Media. My name is Jim Santelle. I'm sitting in for Dom on this Friday, this historic Friday in our nation's history, when along with my terrific producer Jess here at Radio Park, we're talking all about the calamity. There are not enough adjectives in the English language of destruction and dismay to accurately describe tempers flaring, voices being raised, loud rebukes in the Oval Office of the United States White House just this afternoon, just today, resulting in the end, not in any agreement, not in any deal, as the president would say, that would provide some monies to this country and maybe some national security to the country of Vladimir Zelensky there in Ukraine, anticipating that there might be a warming of some of the recent hostilities. That did not happen. If anything, an increase in them. Donald Trump and our vice president castigating Zelensky for not being grateful enough for the U.S. support in its war with Russia, sought to strong-arm him into making a peace deal on whatever terms the Americans dictate, they said. With voices raised and tempers flaring, some of the reporting going on, Donald Trump threatening to abandon Ukraine altogether if Zelensky did not go along. Talking over the Ukrainian leader, as we reported and played in the first hour of our broadcast, the vice president told Zelensky that it was disrespectful for him to come to the Oval Office and make his case in front of the American news media, and demanded that he thank Mr. Trump, which he has done before, for his leadership. Trump jumped in then, told the Ukrainian leader, "You're not really in a good position right now. You're gambling with World War III. Said, "You're either going to make a deal or we're out," Donald Trump said, "and if we're out, you'll fight it out, and I don't think it's going to be pretty." That's language. That's language from the President of the United States of America today, February 28th, the last day of February of 2025, the last day of the second month of this presidency. Not only a breach, a crack in our relationship with Ukraine, but also plainly a change in the world order. When I was in Iraq, very much attentive to the engagement of the State Department, yes, the Defense Department, other agencies overseas, including the USAID, to the notion of a world order, an understanding about how things work and how security and national security, domestic and national, international, can be safeguarded by establishing alliances, preserving those. Very much aware of the fact when I was in Iraq that the world order had switched, had changed recently with the overthrow of Saddam Hussein. I know that remains a very controversial matter here in America, but the reality is that Saddam Hussein is no longer in power there. And regardless of what you think about Iraq, the reality is it is now an ally of ours. It is a democratic republic, even with all of the destruction that came from the war in the wake of the overthrow of Saddam Hussein. That was a huge shift in, yes, the world order in the Middle East. When Bashar al-Assad leaves Syria, and again, not at all clear what's going to happen there in Syria, but that's a shift in the world order that we all need to take attention to and understand that things are changing. It's going to mean a dramatic shift in the way that we understand our own security. And indeed today, as Jess and I have been offering to you as a thesis as we understand what happened today, there has been a shift in the world order. The question in the wake of these uncomfortable, stated charitably, relations and discussions with the leaders of France and Britain, and our vice president berating our European allies about the problems internal to their own nations and not the problems presented by challenges of their foes. All of this prefacing, if it's not already here, a new world order in which the United States is no longer allied with the people who are in favor of democracy and republic representation and all the good things that come with freedom that we've associated in this country with 250 years of our tradition, and other nations across the planet also embracing that. Has the world order shifted? And today have we seen, in no less important a place than the Oval Office of the White House, that crack, that huge chasm today in our understanding of the world order. we've got an awful lot of people who are appropriately weighing in on what's happened here. We appreciate very much Jim from Appleton saying, after listening to Donald Trump and Vance, the fourth grade style bullying of President Zelensky, he said, I've reached the conclusion that the vitriol is grounded in two places. This again is Jim Appleton saying Zelensky was at a campaign event with Kamala Harris, and this is payback time basically, and he refused to dig up dirt on Hunter and Joe Biden. Indeed, in that word salad response that just played just a few moments ago, we got an awful lot of indication that Hunter Biden is still very much on his mind.
Certainly, as is the 2024 election. We didn't play the full clip, but right before this show, Maggie Dawn played it several times, and I did link the entire exchange into last hour's podcast, which I will do again this hour. In that exchange, Vice President J.D. Vance refers to President Zelensky's having campaigned with the opposition. That's the phrasing that he used, the opposition, to refer to the fact that President Zelensky had appeared supporting Kamala Harris. Now, referring to both these events happening during the 2024 election cycle and calling Kamala Harris the opposition struck me as incredibly anti-democratic, lowercase d, as in the democratic ideals of this country.
Could not state it better, right? And everybody should be consuming not only Jess's commentary based upon, again, a rational common sense understanding of what the words mean, even though with respect to our president, they're jumbled, they're unclear, they're random, and they're seemingly misleading. Nonetheless, that's the takeaway from all of this. Again, Bill from Waukesha, as I said before, confirming Zelensky is the only adult in the room. Right? That's exactly what's going on here today. Alternate history, Cam from Appleton talks about today, and others, again, as a part of our communication here. This is Dana from La Crosse. Trump and Vance told the world today that the U.S. sides with the axis of evil. Yes, indeed. That is the new world order that we're seeing develop here. Robert from West Dallas. Other world leaders should boycott meetings with Vance. Cam from Appleton also, again, reporting that our defense secretary just ordered that our cyber command stop work on any Russian threats and prevention. Again, very much in the mind of the president when he speaks about Russia, Russia, Russia. Bill from Waukesha, again, this is a very sad day for America and a great day for Russia. And Claire also saying it's almost as if Donald Trump wants World War III, the gleeful bully. The man is sick, she says, right? And beyond that, this is Catherine from Madison. The abuse of Zelensky today has the look of a stage reality TV episode to make Trump look powerful and demean Zelensky. He did in the end, as we commented earlier, himself comment about the way in which this will make great television. Note that has another aspect to it as well, and that is we recall that Zelensky, very bright, very intelligent, before he became the president of Ukraine, was what? He was a comedian. Very intellectually cutting comedy there in Ukraine about government and about the presidency that preceded him. He's a bright guy. And he also, like Donald Trump, appreciates and values public imagery. Let us see how this cuts. It very well may be that Vladimir Zelensky finds a way to turn this kind of wild exchange, this vitriol, even to his advantage.
I see no reason why it won't.
Right?
And here's why. I have never once seen a bully actually look powerful.
Right.
Every time I have seen a bully, I have seen a weak person, someone who is unable to accomplish their goals through the means of communication, through the means of changing people's minds, through reason, through logic, through good means. This is someone who only knows how to take down. This is someone who has brought a leader of a sovereign country into the most sacred room of this country and bullied him into submission.
And kicked him out. Without
making a deal.
Right.
Without making a deal.
Right. And our president is apparently proud of that today. And maybe this does appeal. It should not appeal, as our previous callers have indicated. It should not appeal to anybody. As Jess's words are causing for me, it should make the hair in the back of your neck stand up every single American, regardless of your political affiliation, your views about policy and practice in our country, should look at this with abject horror. The creation, the evolution of a new world order, and the destruction of the safety and security that kept us safe and secure for all of these years. We've got more callers. We appreciate that so very much. Your involvement in this important discussion today, understanding that this is going into the history books, and one day, as Jess has said, as I have said, as you have said as well, we may look back on this very day, this 6-minute and 50-second event, which again, as Jess has so professionally done, tagged and included in our podcast here on the Dom Salvia Show, accessible here for you to consume whenever you care to go back to it. This may well be the kind of thing that students of history are taught, not just in the next 5 or 10 years, but down the road as well, as the change on the face of this planet. We do have other callers calling in. Dick from Madison, appreciate your being a part of our discussion this afternoon.
My apologies. Who were you calling for?
Yes, we're going to take Dick right now. Yep.
All right. Welcome to the air, Dick.
Dick, are you with us? Yep, I think you're there.
Dick from Madison, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
There you are.
Very good. Dick, glad to have you with us.
You know, you're one, and I didn't like this at the time, when Ronald Reagan was doing the radio check, and he goes, I've just signed legislation outlawing Russia, and the bombing starts tomorrow.
It was a hot mic. It was a hot mic, right? He didn't know he was, but that's what he said.
And I thought it was just stupid as hell. Just crazy. But I guess my point is, can you imagine what he's thinking now? Or what he would think if he were alive?
Right. This is right.
And I was no fan of Reagan. I'm a devout Democrat. But he had this right. They were the excess of evil.
Right. That's Ronald Reagan's language. And he would, if he was alive today, he would be horrified by all of this. We're going to take more callers as the Dom Salvia Show continues. Appreciate, Dick, your comment. Taking more callers right after this coming break on this major historical story that we're covering here on the Dom Salvia Show. Stay with us. Jim Santelle sitting in for Dom, and this, the second hour of our broadcast this afternoon, joined in the studios by my partner and my colleague, Jess, and together we're taking your phone calls, comments. Appreciate all of that tremendously. Noting as well as Dom and Jess have said in the past, have posed this rhetorical question, but it's more than rhetorical, right, Jess? The question often asked by Dom on this very show, perhaps a weekly event for you and Dom, is asking and answering, maybe in part, the question, if Donald Trump was a Russian asset, what more would he do? And the answer is not a whole lot. This sounds an awful lot like someone who is indeed a Russian asset, as Donald Trump, or Dom often says, describing Donald Trump. And we perhaps got more fuel for that particular theory today, that Donald Trump is, in creating this new world order, bending it toward Russia, bending it toward a dictatorship, a nation that is not a place of freedom, bending it toward a nation that would like nothing more than our own destruction. We wonder again what the motivation for Donald Trump is today to throw the president of Ukraine out of the White House and send him packing back to Kyiv. We've got lots of callers calling in, including Pat from Milwaukee. Appreciate your comment, which I suspect is very much along those lines of what Dom and Jess often say. Go ahead, Pat.
Yes, Jim, good to hear. Yes, hello, Jim. It's good to hear you. And just a few days ago, Dom had Matt Flynn on again, your colleague, lawyer. And Matt has been emphasizing for years that Trump is a KGB asset. I think today's demonstration was sort of an indication that Trump's marching orders from Moscow were to get basically Zelensky to virtually surrender. And that would be, so he doesn't surrender to Putin. He keeps Putin from having that indignity or being blamed for that. But he literally surrenders to Trump in a sense by acquiescence. And it was painful to watch.
It is painful.
It was nauseating. It was nauseating to see what was happening. And we're in a world of hurt if this continues. I am shocked that things aren't changing and moving in Washington as we speak.
Absolutely. And Pat, appreciate again the observation, which I believe every American should share. Exactly as you have articulated it, this is a time for great concern about our own national security. Yes, indeed, the security of the Ukrainian people as well. And one wonders aloud, what is the motivation for our president to do this? What is going on here? And the answers are not pretty. The answers are not good, and students and professors of international insight, much brighter than I, may in fact provide us with some answers one day as they rewrite the history. But indeed, this is history right now in the making, and it's not a favorable arc of history. Pat, thanks so much for your good comment and your observation here on our afternoon broadcast. Ali calling in, also focusing on the history of what happened today here. Ali, thanks for joining me.
Well, I think that this was a setup for Zelensky. I think this was intended all along. And they talk about the shot heard around the world. Well, this will be the attack heard around the world. Every country will see this and understand that Trump and Vance can never be trusted again. Unfortunately for our world. And also, I want to point out that Lindsey Graham was on TV today and said he would never be prouder. It's humiliating that he is kissing Trump's rump. He's not kissing his ring or his seat. Let's put it right where it belongs. He's kissing his rump.
It is stunning, again, to see from Capitol Hill, people like Lindsey Graham, again, making those kinds of comments. And Ali, appreciate your calling that to our attention, even as we all recoil in the basic event that we witnessed today, the language, but the response by Republicans in this case, but by statesmen. They're people who are representing us in the United States Congress, people that a few short years ago, not that long ago, at least in my memory, would have been horrified by this kind of thing, by any American president, turning us back on our ally and possibly, as you and other callers have said, opening the door to a full-scale invasion, a takeover by this Russian president.
Can you imagine if President Biden had invited President Zelensky into the Oval Office to negotiate terms of a deal in which our country would support theirs in return for access to rare earth minerals, valuable natural resources, and not only did Biden shout down a democratically elected president, but kicks him out of the White House without signing a deal.
Is again, wait, in what alternative universe are we living today, right, when you make that very good comparison to what could have happened in the past and the predictable reaction to that kind of outrageous behavior by a president if the party affiliations had been otherwise? And that's a part of the tragedy, the great profound challenge that we face today in America, that even on something this fundamental, the right of a sovereign nation to exist, that's been our ally, where they do in fact have elections and that people are heard, and that we've got anyone of any party coming forward and saying, yeah, that's okay if indeed we give up our defense of that nation and we serve up not just the president but the nation itself to someone who is a dictator, who is anywhere near in our allied world order, just the opposite. That's the great concern that Jess articulates, as do many of our callers. Appreciate all of that. As the Dom Salvia Show continues, we'll continue taking your comments, your questions, your articulation of outrage about history in America today, February 28th, 2025, here on the Dom Salvia Show.
I'm standing on the rooftop, ready to fall. I think I'm at the edge now, but I could be wrong. I'm standing on the rooftop, ready to fall. Now I'm standing on the rooftop. Now I'm standing on the rooftop. Now I'm standing on the rooftop. Now I'm standing on the rooftop, ready to fall.
Dom Salvia Show. My name's Jim Santelle, sitting in for Dom today on this historic day in American history when our American president threw the Ukrainian president out of the White House, terminating the vestiges of any diplomatic relationship, probably not just between them, but between our nations as well. We'll talk more about that, taking your calls, your comments as well on this historic day. I'm going to pause for just a couple of program notes as well. Appreciate very much Tom from Jackson sending in a message about what's going on today, this week from the Supreme Court. And indeed, Tom, taking up on your invitation, we're going to be spending a lot of time on our Saturday and Sunday broadcast. That is Amicus, a law review, which I'm also hosting this weekend, talking, yes, about the Supreme Court. It has been busy, Tom, as you know well. We'll talk about the oral arguments taking place just this past week and things that they likely will decide coming up in just a few months. Thanks, Tom, so much for that interest and that focus as well. And then the more immediate program note is, as always, Jess and I, consistent with Dom's tradition, Jess's tradition, are going to spend the last segment of this hour doing something that we call Tell Me Something Good. And so if you too can participate in
please
this.
tell us something good.
Please tell us something good, right, Jess? I've got something, Jess has got something, and you too, if you call in, you can offer a perspective on what's going on today, but also tell us something good going on in your life, in the world, in the state of Wisconsin, as we finish out this broadcast later in this half hour. But before we do that, lots of good callers, lots of good insights, perspective, and questions coming up. Let's begin with Ed. Ed, you've been focused on all of this today. What's your comment, your question, your inquiry? Glad to have you with us.
Well, thanks for listening to me. I'm just calling that, express my sorrow to know that this country is so lacking, and according to the words of our president, in raw earth. He said, we do not have raw earth. And, I live in the countryside. I look at my plowed up fields, and I'm thinking, boy, somebody should come here and prospect for rare earth metals. Maybe we do have them here, but we don't.
Right.
That was sad to hear.
Right. And that's
to the world press.
Right.
That we do not have raw earth.
And that's our president speaking. And people do listen to the president, regardless of who occupies the White House. Right. There's always been a sense of authority. It goes back again to James Madison writing. He contemplated that the president would be someone to whom we can look for information and guidance and frankly, support and solace in tough times. That is not this presidency.
No, ideally our president should be not only our chief diplomat to the rest of the world, but our chief ambassador from the people of power to the people, the person who can communicate the message of America.
Exactly, right? And not only do we not get, Jess, what you just described so well, we get just the opposite, and we get lies, right? The number of times that the president every day says things out loud that are simply demonstrably not just misrepresentations, not just fudging on the facts, but there's simply lies. There's simply deception for his own purposes. Ed, appreciate very much your observations as well. Appreciate also all of our callers, including Wisco Paul. Paul, you're here with us this afternoon. Appreciate your comment or your perspective along the way as well.
Well, thanks for taking my call. This is a hard day.
It is a hard day.
I'm as a vet, I'm kind of, but I'll give you two names that still make me mad, and it's Comey and Garland. They didn't do their job, but I had so much hope starting today that they would reach some deal. Right. But I really don't think they had any intention of reaching a deal. I think Zelensky was set up, and this was the plan all along. And that's one of the reasons it's a big letdown for me, because I thought we had a chance to do something good.
Right. And something would be good for all of us, not just the Ukrainians, but certainly the Ukrainians at the top of the list, something good for the entire international community. we had this opportunity here, and although it might be somewhat unknown to us exactly what the nature of this deal was going to be, it involved minerals of some kind, as we've been commenting about all afternoon, but some understanding that would somehow maybe one day bring some peace there and stopping the killing and stopping the war, but also on terms that do not give Putin what he wants, which is a takeover of the Ukrainian nation.
Which is the critical aspect of this. Not only that Trump is intent on, strip mining Ukraine of its rare earth minerals, not its raw earth minerals, as Trump said several times, and as our caller Ed pointed out. But Ukraine surrendering to Russia, giving up all of the land and all of the people, the thousands of Ukrainian citizens who have been not only forcibly taken into Russia, but who have been kidnapped into Russia.
Undeniably, a tremendous number of war crimes, some of which we know about, many of which we do not. And the victims of that war, prosecuted by this despot coming out of Moscow, the profundity, the horror of that cannot be overstated. And today, our president seemingly throws his lot in with that very authoritarian government and throws out the man who is, yes, coming here to seek peace in some way that can preserve his nation, his people, and not to happen, as Paul has just indicated. Mm-hmm. Joe from Madison, let's hear from you also. Appreciate your participation in our program this afternoon.
Great show, and I really appreciate all the information and background. I think it's really helpful to the audience, and great comments from people that were also really informative, and I just can't thank everyone enough. Absolutely. It's been wonderful, in a bad way, but still wonderful.
Yes.
My 2 cents is about this, which is I think that Zelensky was set up. It was the fact that Vance was in that office. There was no reason for him to be there or for Marco Rubio to be there in what was going to be taking place. Otherwise, there would be diplomats equal to that coming from the Ukrainian side, and there weren't. And I think that the other thing that was happening there was Zelensky knew that he was going to be set up, and he has prepared. And the preparation that he has to make is to know that he was going to get a rotten deal from Trump and be belittled and betrayed by him. But I think what's been interesting is the immediate response in Europe. There have been over 17 countries in Europe that have immediately put forth messages of we stand with Ukraine. And the most important one to me is one that speaks to the comments that you had earlier in the show where you said the world is changing. And the comment would be that by the policy chief for the European Union who said, and this is a quote, the free world needs a new leader.
A new leader.
Now, note that that person did not, they didn't say the EU. They said the free world. I found that to be fascinating.
Absolutely.
They're giving up on us, people. They're giving up on us. They cannot trust us. We betray. We're on Putin's side. So a new game, it's a new roll of the dice on the board, and the free world needs a new leader is a very evocative way of saying, okay, we're wiping our hands and moving on. And as another caller said earlier, I do think that that's going to leave us in a world of hurt. That is not a good place to be.
Absolutely. Then, Joe, appreciate so much once again that sage observation there. It is a new world order, and we may find ourselves in a part of that world order that is not only uncomfortable, but downright destructive to our nation one day. That's the great fear. That's the great concern coming out of what, again, at least superficially, sounds like a spat, but it's so much more than that. It is so much more than that. And to the good comments here already made about the motivations for this and J.D. Vance being there, take a look at what Jess has posted on all of the broadcast stations here of Civic Media. Take a look, whether it's on television, but listen to it here on radio. And you'll get a sense that J.D. Vance's intercession into this conversation does seem a bit planned. And to that extent, there may be something to that theory about setups, and we don't know. Historians will find out one day, and this will be written about. But it certainly does strike an awful lot of people who are both inside and outside of what was going on there, that there was something very, very nefarious going on here, and indeed resulting in this catastrophic event in American history. Kurt, calling in from Madison, also appreciate your comments about our president and what happened today.
Yeah, I've sadly had to watch Trump for a very long time.
This is an individual who has got the intellect of about a fifth grader. He cannot speak in complete sentences. That's why he uses his hands so often. If you simply go back, as painful it is, and watch how he behaved in speaking with Zelensky, he never once made a complete sentence that made any sense.
Right.
Although other than him saying, "Oh, you're making a big mistake," I'm talking about the initial communication.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I do see, and I'm in agreement with Joe. I know Zelensky. He's a smart dude. He knew he was walking into a trap, but his hands are tied. He had to go in and deal with these idiots. But I see a silver lining to this. I think that for the world seeing what went down and how it went down, and with someone who is now the president of the United States, I'm not saying this is the final catalyst that will, start tipping things the other direction, but I think it will start changing things quite dramatically, and that's starting with the European nations and the United Nations. I think the United States is about to learn a very, very terrible lesson, what it's like to be, a bad person.
Right. And either on our own or allied with some people who do not have our best interests in mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
The allies that we may be shouldering up to and embracing right now do not have our interests at heart. They do not. And Kurt could not agree more with all of that. Again, historians will be looking at this and telling us more about it. But to the extent that, again, this particular story, as horrific as it is, does have the attractiveness of having an oral aspect to it. You can listen to their words. You can listen to this fight. And yes, indeed, if you pull it up and watch it visually, your good point about people around the world being able to access this, to hear it, to consume it, and to see our president do what he did today, there's clarity to it. I know that all the nations on the face of this planet do look to us, and they do understand a whole lot more about what's going on domestically in our nation than we perhaps understand about their nations. We are the focus of a lot of attention overseas. Even so, all of this activity in connection with our budget and cuts and the Justice Department, all the things that we've talked about with such great precision here, they're hugely important. No attempt whatsoever to minimize the significance of any of them. They do not have this visual horror that we saw today. You do see people, yes, with no jobs. You do see these horrific things happening because we're no longer supporting our nations, our allies overseas. And people are quite literally dying in America and overseas as a result of that and the policies of this administration. Today, we've got an illustration, both orally and visually, for all America to see, that defines who we are, that defines who this president is. And in case anyone around the globe has not been paying attention or simply regards this as the latest American presidency, understand now that this is a whole lot more than that, and I think your point cannot be overstated. We have sent a message to the world. This is who we are. This is how we define ourselves. And when we come back, a couple more callers, and then we are, in fact, going to go into our regular segment, Tell Me Something Good, here on the broadcast stations of Civic Media and the Dom Salvia Show. Stay with us.
And we will get to all of your calls. However, those of you who have called in and are still on the lines, when we answer your call, you may absolutely tell us what is burning on your mind. But first, you got to tell us something good.
There's the rule. Very good. Thanks, Jess.
Because I am stronger.
This is the Dom Salvia Show, the final segment of our day. My name is Jim Santelle, joined in the studio by terrific Jess, who has been providing tremendously professional production values to our program all day, in addition to outstanding commentary on the big news of the day, having to do with this event that happened today in the Oval Office of the White House and probably the destruction of any remaining relationship between our president and the Ukrainian president that arguably could have led to some form of peace in Ukraine. History will be written in the days and weeks and months and years ahead, plainly. But today, a day as virtually all, if not all, of our callers and folks commenting on the drop line have said, a day to be sad and scared and concerned about the future. One of those commentators is Steve from Milwaukee. An interesting linguistic item that Steve tells me about. He makes reference to a thing I'm hoping to pronounce this correctly. It's called Gleichschaltung. It's a German pronunciation, a German word meaning synchronization. And Steve says the Germans have a word for what's going on today. It's meaning synchronization, bringing into line the process of Nazification, by which Adolf Hitler, the leader of the Nazi Party in Germany, established a system of a totalitarian control over his nation. Steve, thank you for that linguistic and historical reference as well. And we are now entering into that final portion of our broadcast where we're continuing to take calls, but also soliciting from you the news that you have about something that's good. And that includes you, Gene, calling in from Eau Claire. Appreciate your comment, your question, and then tell us something good about the world in which you live.
I'll tell you something good about the state that I live in, and we have Civic Media and you wonderful people there shedding light on what's going on and giving us an opportunity to express ourselves, which is really important because we're all in this together. And I'm looking forward to 9 a.m. tomorrow because that's a great day, and it always gives me something to look forward on Saturday morning, James.
Gene, thank you so very much for that. Yes, thank you. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Law review. Everybody tune in. You'll love it. Okay, now, today we saw a very abusive, authoritarian, nasty, self-centered, hateful person that everything he does is he attacks it in that manner. And I was sickened when I saw what happened to that man, and it broke my heart. But it also reminded me that this man here who did this in front of the world doesn't care about one person except himself, and he kept bringing it up all the time, stuff that happened to him. And I just want to remind people we are in this together, and we will get through this, but we have to fight and have our voices heard. Call your representatives. It's important because a lot of times they don't hear, and they think that all the cuts they're making and all these things that they're doing, I don't know if they think it doesn't impact or maybe we can't do anything about it, but we can because we got a really bad man. And anybody that supports it in that Congress, they're just as bad as he is. You can judge a person by the company that they keep and admire. So thank you very much and have a good weekend.
Gene, here.
Jeannie.
Thank you so much for that profundity in observation here. Words for all of us to consume. Telling us something good along the way about broadcasts here on Civic Media, including my own, which is tomorrow morning, Amicus, a law review, taking up, as Tom has encouraged, an awful lot of other things going on in Washington, D.C. and around our nation, including those lawsuits and other matters. But turning now to my friend, my partner, my producer, Jess. Tell us something good, Jess, that we can focus on as we begin to conclude our program.
I will tell you something good in just one moment. Well, actually, I'm telling you something good right now. Matt from Middleton texts in something good. People are waking up, and there's always ice cream.
Two good things, right? Waking up and getting
Matt
ice
from
cream.
Middleton,
Right?
I
Outstanding.
think, not quite ice cream, but custard. I believe on my way home, I'm going to stop at Culver's.
A third good thing, not only the notion
third
of custard,
good
but
thing.
also getting custard, right?
And here
Right?
is something good.
Very
the weather is warming up. And there is a very strong wind out today, but I happen to love that. This is going to go a little in a direction. I used to have very long hair, and about a year ago, I decided to just chop it. and I now keep my hair just about at my ears. And I love the feeling of the wind just blowing through my hair. So that was something that I was able to experience today that I'm looking forward to experiencing this weekend on some planned walks. That is my something good, getting out into nature.
Could not be better stated. Anticipating, again, the coming spring, the time when we can be outside with greater frequency, enjoying this great state, this great land, which is still a great land. Lots of challenges, as our callers and as Jess has said, as we go forward in wrestling with and addressing a president who does not, regrettably, have the best interests of our nation in mind. But here's my good item. It's small, but it's significant, even though it comes at the hands of Donald Trump and a fellow named Elon Musk. The reality is that a thing called the Merit Systems Protection Board, which is an agency of the federal government, just a day or so ago, reinstated 6 federal workers who were temporarily thrown out of their jobs on a probationary status, relatively new in their positions. Now they've got jobs again. That's
Excellent.
Good news. That's good news, perhaps presaging more good news down the road. Delighted that all of you have joined me and Jess this afternoon for this discussion of history in America. Plainly, we continue to address this and other issues related to it here on all the broadcast stations of Civic Media. Have a good Friday. Have a good weekend, everybody. Take care.